And only the strongest came the morning presentations. Our first speaker for today, we all know he's the symbol of freelance translation in Ukraine. I know that after his presentations, everybody will die to become a freelancer. Good morning. One more thing I know about my reputation, thanks, and
Okay, everybody knows me as the guru, as a freelance guru, as the sensei in translation, the way Catherine Raptseva named me. On the other hand, Stanislav Kaleniuk always calls me a troll, but a positive one, who's trying constantly to lead the translators astray, because from the perspective of an agency, the agency has to be something like the sun in the sky for the translator, and I say that this is not quite the case. And I'm going to, I want to thank you for still keeping the interest for my presentations, and I'm happy to welcome you here, and I hope to see you sometime again, and I hope to prove that all my reputations are true. We're going to talk about certification today, and the perspective will be about diversification, and diversification as a way to increase the number of your income sources. The idea came up just by chance. I got a letter from an Australian colleague inviting me to participate in compiling and writing a book named Diversification in the Language Industry. The underlay it was as follows. Diversification today can be a good way to increase your income, and in some cases also to survive. I hope we are not really talking about survival, but still I thought this idea to be very exciting, and I was happy to accept it, and the book was really good. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. It's not cheap, but it's worth that because it's got lots of interesting and useful ideas in it. And I was, it also made me happy because the diversification subject was somehow rang the bells in terms of being in alignment with my own ideas and actions. And I think you will understand why we can talk about whether or not we should look at the diversification as such. We can quote a number of reasons. I will offer you three of them. The first one being philosophical. So let's say our perception of the reality is based on our experience, first of all. But we face a kind of contradiction where we choose the foundation of the building in which we exist, meaning the reality. We choose the past as the foundation, but we want to live in this building in the future. I think each of you has at some point felt that when you started doing something, as you grow and as you get more experience, you start doing something better and better, and all of a sudden you get worse at it, even though you have the experience. What's the reason? The reason is as simple as that. The world is changing, and our algorithms are now not appropriate and not efficient. I would phrase it like that. If we remain unchanged in the constantly changing world, we reduce the efficiency of our actions, and in some cases we make them completely inefficient. This is the philosophical reason. I could also quote an example. of a story a friend of mine tells sometimes. Those who know me better know that plants is one of my hobbies, and this made me friends with different people who are not translators. And I have a friend who grows different plants, both those that give fruits and decorative ones, and he's got the experience of 10 years experience, and he just recently found that he is not able to grow birch trees, even though he was using the same technology and the same methods. Maybe he was even better at that than before, and it took him 2 years to realize that it was because the soil had changed, meaning that the external environment had changed, and the same happens to us. We have to adapt to new circumstances all the time. The second reason that leads us to the idea to look at diversification is probably one that has to do with potential and our profession. My ancestors, for several generations of my ancestors, were quite well off for several and they were very well respected in their village because they were a family of smiths. If I wanted to become a smith now, I wouldn't have been so well off as they once were. In terms of our psychology and mentality, we realize that our professional growth, our career, is shown as a straight line. We start as a disciple, we then grow into an intern, then we grow into a young professional, simply professional, senior professional, and maybe at the end of our career we may rise to the top management level. The length of our life in the profession as at present is growing much shorter. As experts argue, by 2030, more than half of the professions existing now will disappear. If I can remember the welcoming word from the Gala CEO, I had a few words. So the first one is that the translation industry is flourishing. This can't but make one optimistic if this person is an agency CEO, but at the same time, the share of translation in the traditional sense of the word is constantly decreasing. I know that we will very soon leave this profession, and I love traditional translation, and I like it even more than the translation activity in the modern sense that has to do with technology and so on. I still translate because it gives me good income, but I realize that the demand will change, and we're not talking about the demand for translation as such, but rather the demand for skills and other professional features. It's very likely that as a translator I will not satisfy the parameters of the future demand in several years from now, maybe 3, 5, 10 years from now. And the reason that has to do with freelance is that each of you knows periods when all clients disappear at once, and no one knows where, no one knows why. Only they do that. For me, this makes me only happy. During these periods of unemployment, I'm able to complete things that I haven't been able to complete because of the work. I focus on my family, on my hobbies, whatever. such breaks are a pleasure for me, but for some they become anxious because of that. And from this perspective, diversification, meaning other types of activities, other things that you do, help you fill these breaks when you don't have a job, and at times you can do that with a profit. If the types of diversification are numerous, and they exist in any type of profession, any practice, any type of activity that brings you additional income can be viewed as diversification. But I will still list some categories, and this will include some examples of non-conventional perspective on that, and they might even wake some creative imagination, some creative ideas in you. One natural type of diversification is growing the range of the services you offer. We do not go far from the profession. Additional specialization may well become an example of a good quality diversification, where we expand our business to a greater range of topics and specializations in translation. This is even normal. I don't have to go deep into details on that, but one thing is that you don't have to go too far from your key specialization or specializations. Because when you know both agriculture and gynecology, this might make one suspicious. At the same time, there are some specific areas that are quite appropriate because they may reflect one's hobbies. One example is the plants that I have mentioned. I was twice approached by clients who did not actually specify how they found this information about me, even though this is not really very public, and it is certainly not in English. But I had a Dutch client approach me with the request to do a translation on plant growing. This is my hobby, and this is not really very public. Nonetheless, this is one of the subjects, be it hotels and travel, or cuisine, or any other subjects that you like, that can be called your hobbies. These are very much appropriate for a translator. Next thing I like to mention is we can develop, or we can study, we can master additional skills that will again help us offer a broader range of services. By way of an example, I will tell you about DTP, the so-called DTP, or the ability to work with the AutoCAD files. And we can offer these services as a package service, offering a technology, a tool, together with translation. This is also quite conventional, and this is nothing to really dwell upon. Things become more interesting when we try to capitalize on the knowledge or the skills that we have. And we try to sell it in a slightly different area. The first thing that comes up is sales of language training services. Being a tutorship is the most primitive example, but still it has the right to exist and is worth using if but still, when I remember my my experience in a tutorship, I know that studying language is the most efficient in a group of 4 to 6 people, and therefore the price of your work grows 4 or 6-fold, and it's absolutely viable and practicable. Moreover, today our market is limitless because of the internet. We can teach a Mexican, we can teach Russian to a Mexican, we can teach Russian to a Sri Lankan. I'm in very active communication with a friend of mine, and many years ago we were pen pals. We exchanged the traditional letters, and he asked me to teach him Russian. I refused because this is not what is of interest for me, but still there is a demand. I repeat that our market is limitless in terms of territory, in terms of geography. Another interesting thing is another interesting thing to add in this sphere is that we develop professional skills that have to do with translation and the translation business and business as such, because freelance is first of all a kind of business. Some of us have become good project managers, even project managers for themselves. Some of us may understand how we should work with clients. The psychology of client relations can be viewed as a separate science. You can tell about that, you can share your ideas about that, and this is what the very good and helpful platforms exist for. Each of us have probably attended a webinar as a member of the audience. For example, ProZcom always invites people who are able to teach their younger colleagues, and I know that quite a large number of our colleagues have successfully used these platforms and these opportunities. And they might get $700 to $1,500 for a 1-hour webinar. Why not do that? This is an additional source of income. It might not be regular, but for some coaches, for some trainers, it might even be a regular source of income that helps you replenish your family budget. Coming back to the conventional services, we understand that the market today is oversaturated with the goods that are of identical quality or of comparable quality, and the customer will often focus on additional characteristics rather than the key ones, meaning the sales point, profitability, usability, and so on. I've long thought of an idea to write a course in the English language based on the Beatles songs, and you can learn English using absolutely different programs and sources and materials. But I don't think anyone has ever written a course based on the Beatles. I might once want to write this course, and I think I will have a customer who will want to buy this course. I cite this as exclusively as an example of something of the fact that you can offer a standard service in a non-standard way. As an abstract example, I'll tell you about about some guys from Lvov who offered their physical product, who marketed it, and they were very successful. Well, I'm talking about just standard socks, but they what they offered was kind of happy socks, exciting socks. The customer clicks on an image of socks, be it flowers or someone's portraits. They will do that, and they will post it. They will dispatch it to any country of the world. And you just imagine the pleasure that you get when buying this goods, this product. And it's from this perspective that I offer you to view some very conventional types of services that we can offer.
But I advise to consider the services as a slightly different factor for them to be more sellable. Our activity involves the activity of dealing with information. Information is a valuable product. What kind of information can we sell? Are there any ideas? In general, the idea of selling information is nicely developed by Common Sense Advisory Group and Konstantin Dranch, who is gathering information about the Ukrainian translation bureaus. His possibilities of making this information, of turning this information into money are great. Common Sense Advisory Company earns money by doing this activity. They gather information on the voluntary basis about different companies, and they generalize it, analyze it, and make conclusions. And after that, they offer this information to the final users. That's a great idea and well developed. Under the certain reputation, it can be easily commercialized. What information could we offer? Now we are living in a certain political atmosphere. Every day, in the places where we live, certain events take place, and the world mass media cannot direct journalists to every city of the Ukraine where these events take place. Offer your services. Write about it, gather information, provide it with photos, and contact with different mass media from the largest to the smallest ones. There is a great chance that this information will be interesting to some mass media. When I'm trying to track the events and understand what is happening, I see that the information about the Ukraine is published everywhere, BBC, on Al Jazeera, and whatever. The world has a great pleasure to observe this endless series. Help them understand what is happening. State your point, no matter how correct it is, how right it is. As real journalists, you can sell yourself and be a voice of one party or another. It depends on our moral and ethical qualities. If our activity is to commercialize our aim is to commercialize our activity, it might seem worthy. One more way of diversification is a complete exit beyond the limits of your profession. When we discussed with Nicole Adams the concept of our book, I was adhering to a broader sense of it. The book was quite big, and we decided to stop on the kinds of diversification which were more or less connected with our profession. Let's remember the pauses which might appear in our profession. I feel these pauses, for example, by working with plants in the kitchen garden. It gives me a great pleasure and self-realization. Quite unexpectedly, I realized that it begins to give a substantial income. How substantial? Remember, we are talking about additional sources of income. Translation remains the basis of welfare of my family, but my kitchen garden provides money for payments for communal services, and I even have money to buy new plants. There is one interesting thing. Seeds are very cheap. A seed of any exotic plant can cost 25 cents. In a year, a seed turns into a young plant, and it costs already $5 or $7. The price increases twice, 10 times even in a year. In 5 years, this plant may cost even $500. The most expensive plant I've seen, this is a standard plant, which can grow in the middle belt of the Ukraine. It costs 16,000 euros. You see, from the seed to the sellable goods, the price increased many, many times. I came to the shop assistant to know if such plants are popular, and he answered that they are very, very popular, and the people buy them eagerly, and they even queue to buy these plants. The plant has been taken care of greatly, and together with it, this is an ideal way of increasing your income from a very cheap price to a very high sellable price. The situation is quite different with cultural values of pictures. Their cost increases. Their cost increases in the course of years or decades. That's very interesting from my point of view. The way beyond the limits of your profession can assume any way. I know some people when they got free time, they began painting. They succeeded. Not all of them, but they succeeded. A couple of people began selling their paintings, perhaps not for a very large sum, but they began doing it. I think there is an additional factor here. In the Maslow pyramid, there is no need in money, but there is a need in self-realization. And this ability to self-realization can be commercialized, can make money. can bring money. I will talk about a couple of moments more for you to think over. That's up to you to decide whether it's interesting for you or not, whether you can use it or not. It's up to you to decide. But nevertheless, an additional way of getting income may be, or perhaps should, our obtainable income, the income we get. We might not do we might do wrong way by spending it for food, but an additional income can come from different sources, for example from bank deposits, what else? Internet network. Many of us are users of Facebook and Twitters, and many of us also have their own blogs. Blogs and other network means of communication are the means of disseminating information, and they also can bring a lot of money. I haven't studied it yet, so substantially to give some recommendations to you. But I know that if your blog is popular and many people visit your blog, you can take advantage of it. For example, putting some advertising there and taking money for it. But that's not the point. The point is that while doing something, you earn money without making any additional efforts. You have your blog by no means, and you post in your blog by all means. Why refuse getting additional money? That's about all I wanted to share with you, and please ask questions. Yes, Tatiana, please.
Я в мене доповнення, якщо можна, до всіх перелічених вами способів. Мої не такі прямі, вони не одразу приносять прибуток безпосередньо.
You talked about different types of activities which can bring you money by, for example, writing a review in your own sphere, and it will give you attention as a specialist in that sphere. Is it so? Thank you very much. That's a very good remark. The topic is very broad, and I limited it with the topic of creating additional sources of income. If we are talking about sources of additional income, we also can mention the sources of getting your reputation and ways of self-education. Sometimes you can get self-education in quite unexpected spheres of life. It also creates the possibility, if not a way of income, but the possibilities which could prove necessary when the situation changes, when the political climate changes, and might be useful for you in general. Yes, Maxim. Maxim, thank you very much. You know, I love listening to you, and I know that I act as a devil advocate. And let me ask another question to you. Diversification is quite a good thing, but as far as I understand, there are quite a lot of people in this audience who are our young colleagues who only begin their career or are at an early stage of their translation career. Don't you think that in our sphere and in our market, not only in the Ukraine, but within all post-Soviet area, there is a great problem with some basic competences, some basic translation qualification, and many people cannot earn a lot of money because of this. Don't you see some risk in the point that after listening to you, some people might think that they might be engaged in another type of activity, and it would be wonderful because they did everything they could in translation and they earn quite a big sum of money in it. But the people who might train, who are unexperienced translators, and and finally they can prove bad translators and actually leave the translation activity. So Maxim, thank you for your question. It's quite a diverse problem. I often compare translation with music. There are a lot of people who don't have any ear for music, and they go to study in the conservatory. There are many people who don't have any talent for translation, and nevertheless they go in the translation sphere. Is it worth for those people studying, playing the violin without any ear for music? Is it worth for such people to study translation without having actual inclination for it? Some skills are achieved by continuous studying, and the level of good craft is also necessary. But perhaps such people have a talent for journalism, for gardening, or perhaps they have an inclination for being scientists or whatever. Choosing a profession, we act on the basis of our preferences, on the basis of our likings and dislikings, on the basis of rumors we've heard that some people earn a lot of money or be in this or that profession. We don't have any complete information about the future. So my answer is that I gave you the information and it's up to you to decide. Thank you very much, Oleg.